Good evening, everyone. First face you've seen today? No. Can you all hear me all right? I'm in the cloud? Yes, thank you. I've got the 65 of you before me in our cloud Zendo. Thank you for joining, as well as 30 more on YouTube. Thank you also for joining. And some 20 of us here in the Zendo. So it's full house. And you might be wondering why Helen's taking photos. Hi, Helen. You can take screenshots, then nobody knows. Yeah. You might be wondering why we're wearing masks today, and everybody's okay. We're just taking some extra precautions because we had just an exposure in the community. So we're just playing it safe, and everybody's 6 feet away from me, and I'll try not to spit as I speak. So, yeah, I'm just so grateful to be here. I hesitate to call it the elephant in the room, but now I can't get the elephant out of my head that got in there. So the elephant in the room is that I'm now wearing this beautiful brown/gold robe, and have the position of sensei or teacher here, as Kozan and I went through a beautiful long ceremony on the 22nd with Roshi Joan transmission. And I just thought I'd say a little bit about what that means for us, and some of the kind of accoutrements, just so in case you're wondering, like, what is with the different color robe? What does that mean? And so I thought I'd just take a moment to speak to that. And the first thing is sensei. What is this word sensei? It's a Japanese word that literally means firstborn or elder. And it usually just refers to a teacher. So it just means teacher. And people who go through the process that Kozan and I did can be called sensei as a position, so a teacher. You could also call sensei anybody who is like Sensei Kaz Tanahashi, who has no formal transmission, but obviously is our old Buddha, and needs no transmission to receive that title, both as a Zen teacher and as an artist. Just any kind of expert or master in any tradition could be called a sensei. For us, it's more like, just graduated from grad school, professor at, the university or something. So it doesn't mean we're like high teachers that are enlightened and can kind of do amazing things. We're just beginning this path of teaching. Well, I just speak for myself. Kozan might be an enlightened teacher that
You really want to just said speak for yourself?
Yeah, speak for yourself. The enlightened ones in the back, thank you. And then, and this color of robe, sometimes you call it gold, but we should hesitate to call it gold because Sensei Kaz one time scoffed at calling them gold robes, because they're not gold, they're mokuran. And mokuran is a color that means the color of silence in Japanese. Moku is literally silence, I think. And this color can be anywhere from like a dark brown that you sometimes see senseis wearing or roshis in the Zendo, all the way to a light yellow or a wheat color. And so anything in that range is mokuran, and it's based on the original color of the Buddhist robes in ancient India, where they took, I believe it was jackfruit, and dyed, discarded cloth, sewed them together, hence the patchwork. Is the tradition of sewing together discarded cloth, dyeing them one color, which can be variegated because it's just a natural color. And I think to this day, monks in Southeast Asia do this tradition. So we have carried this tradition through China and into Japan, and of course now it's slightly different, but I think the color carries through in that way. So that's mokuran, the color of silence. And then you'll see, I haven't been doshi or the officiant yet for service, but once you're a sensei, you will start being a doshi with this ceremonial scepter. This beautiful piece, which is one of the many gifts that were part of the ceremony that Roshi gave to us in ceremony. This is called a kotsu, or sometimes you'll hear it be called a kutsu. And a kotsu literally means bone, I believe. And so I've read, I had to look this stuff up because I was so curious myself. Like, what is this stuff? And please, if you know of a different explanation or a different story about it, please do email me or email us, and I'd love to know. But what I found, this bone scepter, shaped sort of like the human spine, was originally some kind of tablet to hold a text. And it's kind of hard to imagine, maybe this tassel has something to do with it, but that you would hold it here like this, and that would hold up the text that an ancient Chinese scholar would read with this tablet. And now it just became, something that you would use in ceremony or in important occasions. And the tradition is that you could use it as a talking piece. During talks, we rarely ever see a teacher using one during a Dharma talk, but to emphasize points. And in some of the old koans, the stories, you'll hear the teacher hit him with the stick. Well, this could be the kind of stick. And also, and this is just kind of bizarre to imagine, but it can be used as like a rest for maybe if you're just like, oh, I just want to take a load off. You just kind of put it on the ground and just rest up. Maybe the taller ones, you can kind of rest your elbows. Sometimes you see pictures of these elbow rests. I gotta get one of those. No. And then there's another named Nyoi or Ryu. And that in some places it's the same thing as this, and in other places it's a slightly different thing, but it's also a ceremonial scepter. And those usually have like a kind of a flower or round shape on the front. And those are, Nyoi means wish-fulfilling jewel, or that which satisfies. And those were also from ancient China as apparently, well, one was a talking piece and for in ceremonies, but apparently it was used as a back scratcher. And so initially I guess somehow this thing on the front was something you could use to scratch your back, and it became that which could fulfill your desire. And then it became the wish-fulfilling jewel of the Dharma. And when I heard that, I think it was yesterday, I think Kathy told me it yesterday, I said, you know what? I have just such a back scratcher that I could totally see why this thing would be venerated. Please notice my back scratcher, which has satisfied the itch many a time. And so thank you for that brief introduction. Maybe on April Fools, I'll get to use that as my kutsu. So I want to just bow deeply to Roshi Joan and my Dharma brother Kozan, and my Dharma uncles and aunts Shinzan and Sensei Kathy, and all those who came before and are teaching me and us the ways of this new position. And please do let me know if I ever mess up and need some instruction. I'd love to hear it from anyone. So don't scratch is, there's a story I've heard where, speaking of scratching the back, that someone asked the Zen master, what's your one instruction, or what one thing should I remember when doing zazen? And he said, don't scratch. I tried to find it online. I couldn't find the source of that story. Does anybody know where that came from? What master that was? Well, if anybody knows out there, let me know. I'm curious, but I just remember that very vividly. Don't scratch, because that's one of those things, you're sitting there in zazen and it seems like the smallest thing. Like, we've hardly paid attention. If you ask a normal person on the street, does an itch, just a light itch, bother you much, or is it that important? Of course not. But you're sitting there. And for me, I don't know about you, this might be too personal, but it's my eyebrow. I get like this twinge in my eyebrow where it just is like on fire. It's like my face is just seizing up, and I just really want to just go like that. But I don't, right? Don't scratch. Be still. Because I know the moment I reach for it, please sit still. The Hoshi Shuso will say, please sit still. And And it's a marvelous teaching because, of course, we're trying to find the stillness in our minds, and our bodies and our minds are one and interconnected. And as we go into sesshin, it's just a reminder for myself and all of us that the stillness in our own bodies, it's not just like a rigid structure and shackles, and we're just kind of militaristically being disciplined. That's this form, this stillness is where the freedom and the practice can arise. When we're still in our bodies, our minds can follow. And so don't scratch, it's so important. But that's not the practice I wanted to talk about tonight. My talk originally was going to be called Taking the Backward Step into the Luminous Empty Field. Speaking to Hongzhi and Dogen. And later I decided I would change it to Taking the Backward Step into the Infinite Field of Pure Potential. And if you've seen any of my talks before, you can guess that those are for quantum reasons that will be discussed later, hopefully in a brief interlude. In any case, these phrases, taking the backward step, turning the light around, are phrases you often hear in Zen circles. And Kathy, Sensei, brought them up in her talk, and I think in others, as these paradoxical statements of what are we actually doing. And so I wanted to look into that and study it myself, and just, as usual, share my explorations with you. So I believe I first heard the phrase, taking the backward step and turning the light around, in Fukan Zazengi, probably in an Ease and Joy that Kozan was leading, as we always like to read that text for Ease and Joy of mornings. Dogen writes, cease from practice based on intellectual understanding, pursuing words and following after speech, and learn the backward step that turns your light inwardly to illuminate yourself. Body and mind of themselves will drop away, and your original face will be manifest. If you want to attain suchness, you should practice suchness without delay. I feel like I should recite that every morning. It's such a beautiful and yet kind of ungraspable teaching or practice. What do you do? How do you practice suchness or being? How do you practice being when you can't help but being, right? And Kathy pointed to this in her talk. How do you do that which you already are? And so, and yet Dogen says, learn the backward step. Learn this. This is a practice. And so I was interested in looking at this as, well, how is it a practice? What can we do? How do we take the backward step? What do we actually do? We can read these beautiful practice instructions from Hongzhi, and they bring this, for me, it certainly causes a feeling of practice in a way. But then what do? Do you sit with it? And how do you use the imagery? And so here's one way we could look at it. And I wanted to mention, because Norman Fisher Roshi's in the room, as it were. He, and I mentioned to him today, I'm reading this quotes of yours, and there you are, and I just want to talk to you. He's like, anytime. So thank you, Norman. And Norman says in his commentary from The Art of Just Sitting on the Fukan Zazengi, he says, this backward step is a famous saying of Master Dogen. It is the opposite of knowing or experiencing, or rather prior to knowing or experiencing, not prior to in time, but in depth. In any case, all language fails us here because what I am trying to express doesn't have to do with space or time. And all our language is built on metaphors of space and time. And so he's pointing to this ineffability of this practice. It's like we have to, in a way, all Hongzhi ever talks about is this practice, or Dogen, you could say. And yet, what is it? It's so hard to put into words in kind of a logical, analytical way. And so they use metaphor and they use imagery, and you just have to feel it. So Dogen, of course, wasn't the first person to use the phrase. We've heard it before. And in Monshin's talk on the grass roof hermitage or hut, Shito Shichian says, turn the light around to shine within, then just return. The vast, inconceivable source can't be faced or turned away from. And so he was writing that in the 700s, 400 years before Hongzhi and 500 years before Dogen. And obviously it rang a bell with both Hongzhi and Dogen and ourselves here as we continue to look at this metaphor practice. And he also points to this paradox, this source, which we're looking for, trying to find by turning the light around. It can't be faced. You can't see it. You look for it and it's not there. And then yet it can't be turned away from. Like they sometimes talk about Buddha nature in this way. You can't ever quite see it, and yet you can't not see it. What is that? That doesn't make sense intellectually. So how do you approach that? What can you do? And so 400 years later, Hongzhi and Cultivating the Empty Field, if you're in the book, it's page 38. The backward step and the upright cauldron is this practice instruction, in which he says, with the depths clear, utterly silent, thoroughly illuminate the source, empty and spirited, vast and bright. Even though you have lucidly scrutinized your image and no shadow or echo meets it, searching throughout, you see that you still have distinguished between the merits of 100 undertakings. Then you must take the backward step and directly reach the middle of the circle from where light issues forth. Then you must take the backward step and directly reach the middle of the circle from where light issues forth. So how do we get there? To the middle of the circle. And one way, as Sensei Shinzan gave in his talk, is called the circle of wonder, through wonder, which is, through not knowing what something is and just experiencing it. Or as Kaz says, that, quoting Dogen, what is it? 1,500 miracles in the morning and 400 miracles in the evening. So everything is miraculous or wonderful. That's perhaps a way to approach the source. For me, a little bit more maybe naively physics-minded, I imagine the center of a circle literally, and spokes of my awareness or attention going out. And so the circle, if we consider our awareness as being this kind of field that goes out from this center, is a circle or sphere. And perhaps the practice of turning the light around can be done by using awareness as these spokes, as these things that usually go out, but instead of just like, oh, there's Shinzan, oh, there's Kozan, oh, there's the cloud. Wait, what cloud? It's like turning it around and seeing how it comes in. So I thought we could just experiment with this practice and just practice it together, and I'll kind of guide through this turning the light around awareness practice and see what we might come up with to find that center. So just settling in and breathing and noticing our bodies. Let's start with the auditory field. What do you hear? Sound of my voice. Maybe there's construction noises, as you may have heard through the speaker, the microphone during zazen. Crickets or birds, nature, the wind, the creaking of the zendo. So you're just noticing these perceptions arise. And then, as if the sounds were coming into your ears, you follow the sound in. And just kind of drawing a line. Of course, it's in your imagination, but like, where is it actually going? You follow it in to your ear. Here the sounds come. They hit your eardrum. They go into your brain. And somehow they enter your phenomenal awareness, your mind. Where do they go? Can you feel where those sounds land? What is listening? Where is it? Is it in the middle of your head? You might say, well, it doesn't land anywhere. I'm just hearing it. Where are you hearing it? Where are you that is hearing it? And then just notice how you feel there. And maybe we'll ask each other, what have we found there? Something that can't be faced and yet can't be turned away from. What is the quality of that listener, that hearer, that awareness? Is that you, or is it something else? And try again, just hear the sound, follow it in to the hearer, and look for that hearer, or listen for it. And now maybe open your eyes, and this one is maybe easier to kind of see the lines. See something in front of you, some object that you can rest your gaze still upon. And then see if you can follow that, what you're looking at, back towards yourself. And follow the kind of what you imagine the path of the image to be as it comes from what you're looking at. So you can think of it as light bouncing off what you're looking at and then coming into your eyes. And then where does it go? Well, my image just switched from one person to Kathy, so. And yet what was watching, what saw the change, didn't change. That still point of awareness, just whatever I'm looking at, and you can look around, change your view. Can you feel that no matter what is happening out there, something's still, that center? And what's it like to look at that? So now instead of focusing on what's outside, you really try to turn that awareness on itself. What is looking? So that was just a short experimental practice, but feel free to use it yourself. But I'm curious now, I don't know if we're set up for, we can just, if anybody would like to share, what did you find there at the center? What is it like there? You turn on the, anybody like to share in the room? We have one hand up. Hold on, Marcy, we've got to change the speaker to the Samsung. It wasn't working, okay. But it's the computer? Okay. Marcy?
First of all, congratulations, Noah. What really struck me in that is that we're just receptors. Like, I think I'm seeing the plate and I'm hearing the cars outside my window. But really, they just exist and I exist and I'm receiving them. I'm like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're a receptor, the sensations are coming. But
yeah,
if you,
and I think of it as I see this plate in front of me.
Mhm.
But
And what,
really, I don't see the plate. The plate is there and I'm receiving it.
and so what was it like to see the plate and then to look back and look for the looker?
Yeah, that I was the receptor, not the perceiver.
And what's the receptor like?
Well, I would need more time with that. Thank you. Step one.
Yeah, no, that's great. What is that receptor, receiver, looker, awareness? You could call it any of these words. It's the thing that usually we say, oh, it's myself, it's me, I'm the one. Well, what is that? You try to find it, what do you find? You just call it out. I'll repeat. What do you find, Todd?
Well, that's what I think. It's more about what I don't find.
Uh-huh.
You know, as I'm doing it, there's just kind of experience happening. What are we doing?
Sorry, just take the mic off. Bonnie,
I
hey,
gotta
Bonnie,
talk into this thing.
Bonnie, you could just take the mic out and just give him the piece. Yeah, so what you're saying was so great. I wanted everyone to hear it.
Yeah, well, you were asking what's found, and my experience with it was more about what wasn't found, and that there was just it got really intense in a way, as there was a loss of that me experiencing this happening, but it was just experience happening. You know, it's just it's really hard to talk about.
Yeah.
And then in that, what I started to have come up then almost immediately out of that was something grasping, looking, you know, for that didn't want that falling away to happen. It was almost like a death in some ways.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Thank you. Anybody, does that resonate with anyone in the room? Yeah. One couple nods. How about out there? Yeah. Yeah, it's like you kind of know the answer, right? You're not going to find it. But it's not important that you know that there's nothing there. What's important is that you feel what that's like. And that's a big difference, because the feeling is not what you'd expect, right? And I'm not saying it is any certain way. Maybe you look and there's nothing there. But isn't that weird? And that's when maybe if like, okay, you don't feel anything, but what do you mean there's nothing there? I'm experiencing this world. This is my phenomenal world. And I don't even, there's nothing there. You know, that you can keep using, if you want, some words to turn back and keep looking and keep looking. And this, I think, is to a certain extent that practice. And I'm sure I hesitate because it's like there's so much more to the practice that I think many teachers have taught on. But for me, that practice of turning around, literally the awareness turning on itself, trying to find it, and then resting in that not finding, right? You don't want to kind of work yourself up and just kind of, but you do it with effort, right? It's like you're really the effortless effort of relaxing into what is this? and then the mind wanders and might be thinking about something, and then we come back to our breath. And then what is this? And that turning the light around over and over again as we prepare to enter Sesshin, I think could be a wonderful practice to sit with. And you know, everything is there if I am everybody. I'm not sure, Karen, what you're referring to, but you can put another comment or question in if you want to clarify. But just a brief physics interlude, because I feel like it illuminates this a little bit for me, this difference between conceptual emptiness or nothingness, which is just nothing, and then the reality of emptiness, which is like when we look within and see that there's nothing there. It's a different thing than the idea of it, right? And so even in modern physics, an empty vacuum, because you think, okay, there's a piece of space that has absolutely nothing in it, the perfect vacuum. According to quantum mechanics, such a vacuum, and therefore all of space, contains practically infinite potential energy. And physicists are still not at the bottom of the mystery of what exactly is, how does that work? Are there 10 dimensions folded in on themselves? And why is it that there's so much energy, if there's so much energy, that the world just doesn't explode? And apparently it's like, it's a possibility. It really is possible, according to the physics that we have now, that the world just slightly shifts in its configuration and then everything's gone. Either in a huge explosion or everything just nothingness, a nothing with no interior just consumes the entire universe and at the speed of light. That could happen. That's real, like modern materialistic physics, you know? And I just think it's so interesting that like, oh, we just fall into a kind of complacent attitude of like, oh, the world is just the way it is, and there's physics and stuff and material. And it's like, no, it's a crazy mystery where the whole world could just vanish, and that every cubic centimeter has the potential energy of like 10 to the 94 galaxies or something like, or 10 to the 94. What is it? Okay. The numbers are just too big. It's just infinite, but like they've actually calculated numbers, and there's numbers for how big this energy is. So I bring that up just as like, I don't know how you guys can kind of stimulate your energy if you start to fall asleep and fall tired. But like for me, one thing could be like, I'm just turning the light in. It's like, yeah, but in that center are 1,000 universes, potentially. And maybe that can wake you up to keep looking within. I feel like such a geek when I'm talking about that stuff. I apologize. One more place where Hongzhi talks about turning the light around as we kind of have given away the answer that there's nothing there. He says in A Monk's Inheritance and the Vanishing Clouds on page 47, arriving beyond images, the sense dusts all disappear. Even then, you must take the backward step and return home to scrutinize this directly in meditation until you are satisfied. The clouds vanish into a single color. The snow covers the 1,000 mountains. Penetrating vision brings the opening to view the total body. And so this is a little bit where I think we have to have faith. Sometimes we talk about this is not a faith-based tradition. In some ways that's true. But faith that we do these strange paradoxical practices, and maybe you do it the first time or the 100th time, and you're just like, I don't get it. Nothing's happening. I look within, there's nothing there. Then my mind wanders and I bring it back and over again. And that's when, for me at least, it's like, you just have to keep coming back until you're satisfied. Well, what does that mean? until you see, until you gain your own experience of whatever it is that we're talking about, Buddha nature, enlightenment, whatever those things are, the putting down the great burden, what it is for you will be seen when you have your own experience of the empty field that is yourself. And so that's why we're together in sesshin and practice period in this life, I think, is to discover that with each other, to help each other on the path, to be in that empty field together, and then to share what we experience. And it's, as Roshi often says, it should be joyful. This is not a somber thing. It's serious and joyful. So I just feel an immense gratitude for this lineage, and the lineage and who's in the line. It's not so important, because you read these stories and people like Shuto are not actually in the lineage, the supposed lineage that I'm in. And yet, of course, one of the Dharma grandparents of our tradition. And so to hear his teaching kind of come down through the centuries and be talked about by Hongzhi, and then by Dogen, and then by, Kathy, and then by all of us. And hopefully it will continue to be talked about. And I'm sure it's, this practice is one that's not unique to Zen. I think many other traditions would say, oh yeah, that's like this thing that we do, in a way, the basis of all contemplative practices perhaps is a kind of turning the light inward. And I love to read about the different styles and techniques. There's a beautiful, I don't know if we have time to go into this in detail, but just between Hongzhi and Dogen, this short practice instruction that Hongzhi gives, the acupuncture needle of zazen, which Dogen then talks about in his fascicle 28. And in Kaz's translation, it's called the point of zazen. But the word, it's zazen shin, and shin is a bamboo needle. And so the point of zazen, or the acupuncture needle. And each of them gives these 5 stanzas. And maybe I'll just read the last stanza of Hongzhi and then the last stanza of Dogen. And Dogen says, there was nothing wrong with Hongzhi's version. It was perfect and complete, and I'm just giving my version. And could be interesting for us to even write our own versions of this as part of our tradition. So Hongzhi, I'll just read the whole thing. Both they're pretty short, but they're just so beautiful. So Hongzhi's the point of zazen, and this is from the Shobogenzo's version of it. The hub of Buddha's activity, the turning of the ancestors' hub, is known free of forms, illuminated beyond conditions. As it is known free of forms, the knowledge is subtle. As it is illuminated beyond conditions, the illumination is wondrous. When the knowledge is subtle, there is no thought of discrimination. When the illumination is wondrous, there is not the slightest hint. Where there is no thought of discrimination, the knowledge is extraordinary with no comparison. When there is not the slightest hint, the illumination has nothing to grasp. The water is clear to the bottom, where the fish swims without moving. The sky is vast and boundless, where the bird flies away and disappears. So Dogen's version of the point of zazen. The hub of Buddha's activity, the turning of the ancestors' hub, moves along with beyond thinking and is completed in the realm of beyond merging. As it moves along with beyond thinking, its appearing is immediate. As it is completed in the realm of beyond merging, completeness itself is realization. When its appearing is intimate, you have no illusion. When completeness reveals itself, it is neither real nor apparent. When you have immediacy without illusion, immediacy is dropping away with no obstacles. Realization, beyond real or apparent, is effort without expectation. Clear water all the way to the bottom. A fish swims like a fish. Vast sky, transparent throughout. A bird flies like a bird. So, thank you everyone for joining me on this exploration. Much more to talk about, and I hope we can discuss this practice and more. Great.